Hi, Donna. We're live.
Beautiful. Good morning.
Yeah. Good morning. Good afternoon.
Good evening, maybe.
Yeah. Good evening. This is really we're looking forward to this because we haven't done one of these for a little while. So it feels like we're in September and we're relaunching our live streams, which is just absolutely wonderful. And then we can, add these into our YouTube channel as well. So we've got lots there as podcasts, as we save them. Today we've picked a topic about self-compassion. Why is self-compassion so important in a fast-changing world? I guess my first reflection was not to define it, because I think we don't need to define it, but maybe we just need to ask ourselves what we think it is. What do we think self-compassion means? Okay, Donna.
Are you going to start or am I going to start?
Well, you're going to start. I'm going to ask you.
You're going to ask me the question? I think self-compassion is a kindness to ourselves. It is that ability to realize that if we're trying our best, the best of what we can at that moment or that time, and it could be different in 24 hours. It could be different in 2 hours if you were doing the same thing. But self-compassion is at that moment, at that time. I had some compassion for myself and the situation I was in, or how I perceived the situation and how I responded or didn't respond. Sometimes self-compassion could be like, I should have spoken up for myself, or I should have said something. And self-compassion could be like, that wasn't the right time to do it.
Yeah.
Instead of saying like, I need to learn to have a voice, or I need to learn to be stronger, I need to be bolder. It's like, that wasn't the right moment to be stronger or bolder. And self-compassion is, I could go in and have that conversation again. How do I understand? Self-compassion is at that moment. Maybe I didn't respond the way I wanted to, but I can make choices.
Yeah.
And so for me, self-compassion is, did the best I could today, or I did the best I could at that moment. Thoughts?
As ever with these live streams, you always make me think. And I think when I hear you say that, I think we can rationalize sometimes those things, because what you were demonstrating there is how it's quite easy to go to judgment of ourselves. I wasn't good enough, or that happened, and we kind of derail a little bit, and then we feel rubbish about ourselves. And this ability for self-compassion is this ability to genuinely, and I mean genuinely, not just rationally, but wholeheartedly, give ourselves a break and actually step in in a way that another person would we may step in for another person, and with genuine warmth and kindness, and recognize a few things, because I think life demands a lot. And we were just chatting before we came online, and I'm hoping that we can explore some of these things. That do we just expect too much of ourselves in one direction and not enough of ourselves in another direction? So we have to be the brilliant mum, the brilliant dad, the brilliant employee, all of these things, in whatever definition that means. But also we have to have the energy to be those things, and self-compassion is a way of being able to keep our batteries topped up so that we can do that. But we're trained, in a sense, to put other people first. So this, in part, is about putting ourselves first, which I think some people find difficult.
I think it's that first thing. I think before we got on, we were just, the chat there was in regards to that, the expectations of ourselves in different areas. Like, are they higher in some and lower in others? And would we be beneficial from actually maybe switching it around, right? Like thinking of the balance, the weight, like you put the food on and you put the weights and you figure out how much you owe, right? So what is the actual scale? I sometimes, for myself, when it comes to this conversation, people say they need to make more time for themselves. And I'm like, oh, I'm not sure if my family would agree that I need to make more time for myself. It's like, but I've always really really believe that I'm a better person showing up because I make intentional efforts to do things. And there's the whole variety of things over the years, but often they're around movement and friendship. Those are the commonalities over the decades. So for me, sometimes it's more about self-compassion is being okay even with the fact that I plan those things and make time for those things. I'm not going to be guilty about them. I don't go to every single hockey practice or sporting event of my son's. I can't physically do that. And self-compassion is it's okay not to be at absolutely every event. I might show up in the middle of breakfast on a Sunday morning because I've gone out for a bike ride or a run at one time. But I still show up, but I might miss breakfast starting, but I just join right in. I sit down and we continue the tempo. But the self-compassion is not even thinking that I'm late. Self-compassion is even the way we label things. So like, oh my goodness, I'm late for breakfast on a Sunday morning. It's like, no, they started. When I get there, I'll join in. We'll finish around the same time. They might finish before me. We'll sit around and wait for me to eat. I don't know. It's even that label of how we label the things we do, selfish. People say you need to be selfish. I don't think I'm selfish. I think I'm compassionate towards myself. I know that I need to have movement. Otherwise, I actually wouldn't be able to facilitate or coach because I have way too much energy. I'm not easy to be around if I haven't exerted some form of something by 9 o'clock in the morning. I can become very difficult to actually be around, and it become difficult for me. Right? We talk about self-compassion and empathy. What about the fact of if we don't actually have compassion for ourselves, what's it like to actually be us? You talk a lot about feeling. Like, what's that feeling? What do you think about that? Where does that take you, Lee?
I don't think we pay enough attention to it. I think that's where it's possible that we just spend too much time in a rational mind in work. I think that, and that's why I do what I do, because I know that for a large part of my life that is true. I experience the world that way. If I had a cold and I could barely get out of bed, I would beat myself up because I had to phone up and say, I'm sorry, but I'm not well enough to come in today. There were times when my kids were young and I needed to go and do something, and I was, people around me were trying to influence that and say, hang on a minute, you're not the child carer, things like that, which I just think are really weird. It's got a lot better. But there is this external influence, I'm talking about here, rather than sort of, there's kind of sets of rules and expectations that can be placed upon us. And this ability, which is actually the next question, which I'm going to pop in, is about slowing down and bringing it back to the question of feeling. How often do we sort of? I'm going to physically sit back in my chair now, and I'm going to say, and say to myself, how am I? We'll often ask people, how are you? But to be able to lean into that question and really mean it, how am I? What is going on for me right now? How do I feel? Because how I feel is going to influence my energy. It's going to influence the way I show up. It's going to influence how I feel in my body, because if you're stressed or you're kind of upset about something, it hurts. And part of it then is about this ability to, well, I'm not saying this is a fact, but I think part of it is this ability to take a moment and observe and say, do you know what? Irrespective of everything that's going on, I'm just going to slow down for a minute. I'm going to slow myself down and experience what's happening for me, because it might be that, rather than click into the next meeting and kind of do something, I might actually need to say, do you know what, I just can't do this right now. I'm gonna go and top up my batteries. I'm gonna go and do something else, especially if it's not really urgent. I think one of the things I remember about being
that can be done quickly though, right? If we can just stay on that for a second, because for sometimes that in between in a daily life is like that in between meetings It can be with number of people working from home. It could be simply right now, it could be getting families out the doors and then expected to jump on a call. And so that slowing down can be a couple of seconds of, I'm just going to stop and enjoy my cup of coffee or my cup of tea. It can be, I'm going to make it really, and truthfully, it only takes like a couple of minutes to have a bite to eat in the morning. I'm going to have something to eat in the morning. That slowing down it's not like, where am I going to get 3 hours of time? It's actually just that's slowing down to appreciate that cup of coffee. It's that slowing down to appreciate, even like today I'm upstairs. It's like looking outside the window just to be able to see that, like appreciate the outdoors for a second. And so I like us to start thinking, I always like to encourage us to think differently about slowing down, because it doesn't mean sitting down on the couch. It doesn't mean having to slow down on a yoga mat. It doesn't mean any of that. It could be changing the type of music you listen to in the car, because it's a little bit slower. It's not as intense. It could be switching off the news and putting on something funny to listen as a podcast as you come in on the tube or the bus. And that ability to slow down comes in many different ways.
And you're reminding me that there's a kind of mindfulness to that. It's like making yourself a cup of coffee and drinking it and actually not even realizing that you've drunk it, rather than making yourself a cup of coffee and actually being present with the cup of coffee and enjoying it.
Yes.
Right. And it over the course of a day or even a week. I mean, sometimes when we think about well-being, it's kind of a bigger thing, what you're talking about is taking those moments and just resetting yourself at certain points in the day and taking stock and saying, am I ready for this? Can I do this? And
the answer is yes, you can, right? That's the thing. When we look at some of the research, that self-compassion is, yes, I can. Am I going to do it at 95% like I normally would? Maybe not today. Today I'm going to do 80%, and that is awesome. And that is that self-compassion. It's that ability to say, my day is full. I can manage it. I have the capacity. I have done this before. And saying everything may not be at 95%, but I'm going to give a little bit more here. And then at this other thing, I'm going to be there, but I'm going to realize that I'm not leading that meeting, so I don't have to be in the same spot. You and I did that the other day. We changed where you were primarily the lead and I sat in the participants role because I wanted to experience it. I wanted to slow down and actually experience. I want to have some compassion that I know the topic, but I really wanted to be able to feel the program from someone else. I wanted to actually, rationally, I can discuss it, but I actually wanted to experience it. So that even requires self-compassion is, I actually want to sit in a different spot in this meeting. I want to acknowledge to people that I'm not showing up in the same spot. And so for me, slowing down allows us then to start feeling, as you often love to talk about, right? That way of being and feeling. I don't know. I just think different ways to slow down can be changing our roles on a team in a specific time, because maybe we need that day.
Do you know, you remind me of quite a long time ago now, when I was first getting into a more senior leadership position, and my team was getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and team meetings, I was chairing the team meetings, every weekend. Somebody working for me said, can we rotate the chair of meetings so that you're not doing it every time? Because and I was like, of course we can. And what it was doing is it changed a lot of things for the better. But it also gave me that opportunity. It gave other people an opportunity to practice things. So creating space for other people to grow. And it also, as you say, gave me the opportunity to be in the meeting, but not running the meeting or feeling like I have to be in control of things. And from that moment onwards, a lot of things changed for me. And that was the person that did that. I'm not going to say who it was, but it was done so kindly. It wasn't done as a criticism or a judgment. It was, have you thought about this? Because I think it would be really helpful for you, and it would be really helpful for others. And I, one of the things that we talk about when we're teaching on our program is this idea of the stage and the theatre. And that sometimes, you don't even if you're the most senior leader in the world or the room, you don't have to be in every scene, especially when you don't have a part in that scene. But sometimes people feel that they do.
Right,
Or
and even an SME, right? So I mean, some people think about leaders, and then some people are like, "Well, I'm not a leader. How's that relevant?" But even as the subject matter expert of an area,
yeah,
the ability to slow down and actually be curious and ask questions is an amazing way for that internal growth and self-compassion, because sometimes the self-compassion when we become an expert in something is I'm supposed to know everything. And people look to me for that. And it's like, but have we caused that? We treat people how to treat us.
yeah,
And so part of slowing down is actually that real inquisitiveness, and self-compassion can come from that. It's okay for me. I'm still the subject matter expert on a topic, but today in the room, maybe I'm not the person who is showing up in that space. I'm actually going to choose to show up more. I'm going to show up in a different way. I'll let you label it how you choose to label it, but I'm actually going to show up in a different way.
mm. And we were just discussing. I mean, I was sort of looking at some of her work, Kirsten Neff's work, who's is a significant researcher in this space. And she talks about a number of things, but one of them in this space is about acceptance that we are human beings.
Yes.
The kind of engagement with humanity, and that and think about what we're doing when we do kind of armor up and we kind of push through. We're kind of sending a message that it's not okay around here to be human. We have to be superhuman. We have to be tough all day long. And it's I'm just mindful of the next question as we're thinking about it, because there are lots of not benefits from just pushing through, being rushing energy, draining your batteries all the time. And what we're talking about isn't trivial. It's not a sort of superficial type of being kind to ourselves, because it's so easy to judge and be judged, and it's so easy to beat ourselves up. Where we started from, and it's a skill set actually. This concept around well-being. That being kind and being and kindness in what we do is very beneficial for us. So maybe we should start there. Let's have a think about what are the benefits of self-compassion. What might they be?
Well, like you likely are comfortable retelling the story with maybe from a lens that's not been blurred. So I could say from the truth, but that truth we know is only one person's truth. But self-compassion is, it could actually tell a story where maybe you messed up, and you're okay with it because you have self-compassion, and you're not going to judge yourself, and you're going to own what happened. And so for me, the benefits of self-compassion is the storytelling. You're not, you go fishing, and how big's the fish, right? This big, right? This big. But that ability of self-compassion is, I actually went out and caught no fish, or I went to the gym and I started at 20. I was there for 20 minutes, and someone's like, "Well, why'd you bother going?" It's like, because I was done after 20 minutes. I was tired. Self-compassion is, I went, I tried, I left. But even that approach to other things, instead of telling someone I went to the gym, or I went for a walk, or I worked on that project, if you could actually say to someone, I started working on the project, and I just was sitting there for 20 minutes and nothing. So I changed my mind, changed focus. If you could actually tell that story without being judged, we would likely tell different stories, and they would be healthier stories, because self-compassion allows us to tell a story from our lens of a more truthful thing. So we're no longer putting our armor on.
Yeah. But I remember when I was talking about this in a group that we were teaching around. What does this mean? How does it show up at work? And if you've had a bad day, and some people, let's face it, their days can be tough. People have young children. Some people are looking after people with disabilities, or elderly people, or some other responsibility that is happening in parallel with their working life. Okay, and
many parallels.
And these parallels come along, and this and work, I always think about when if ever I was off ill with work, you kind of step off and you kind of have a day to recover, and you go back in, and it's just really full on and demanding, when you step out of the energy of that. And what I'm really trying to sort of think about here is, where is the compassion in those environments? Genuinely, where is the recognition that, the other person who may be out of sorts or operating at 80% today is doing their best, and you're leaning into that with kindness and a recognition and a kind of loving to allow that person to kind of be where they're at, and the ability to do that for ourselves. So if we have a bad day and we turn up, it's actually quite helpful to say to people, do you know what, I haven't had the best start to my day, particularly if you're in a leadership position, because you can be a bit off, and if you're meeting people and, if you're honest and you're saying, I haven't had the best start to my day, what you're saying is, guess what? I'm a human being too. We are allowed to be human beings in our place of work.
So what about the other side of it? What about self-compassion? Is compassion, one is letting others know that we maybe like, today, like, letting people know where you're at. But self-compassion is also not everybody needs to know. And so self-compassion could be, I am going to know myself that I'm at this. I'm going to make some choices. I might look at things. But self-compassion is, does everybody need to know everything that's going on as well? Because if I'm not in a space where I feel trust, then I could be putting myself at more harm.
And I think it's a fine line, Donna, between the balance between when we talk about vulnerability.
Yes, it is very fine
being vulnerable, what vulnerability means. And I think you're right. There's it probably is not appropriate to tell people everything about what's going on. But I think that people have, on the whole, I don't know, you may disagree, and that's interesting. But on the whole, if people are showing signs that they need support, there is an innate human compassion that people lean in to support. And I've seen that many times. It's rare that doesn't happen. And what we're also
for you and I, we may have that, but I think other people could be listening where they're like, well, I've told somebody that I needed something, or I've told somebody that, and what has happened is they've been taken off projects, or, someone actually decided to dump more on their desk, or, they tell someone in their family, they tell someone something that they can't, like one time someone asked me to do something. I told them, I can't take anything more on. I said to someone, like, personally, we were going, and I said, I really can't. I really just want to go to this event on my own. I don't want to bring a guest. Like, I don't have the mind capacity to go with a guest that I don't know, to have small talk all night. And the other individual pretty much just poked and poked and poked and poked and said, it almost demanded that. And I'm like, whatever. I'm like, I've asked, I'm extremely extroverted. I'll take a guest anywhere. This was a time where I'm like, I'm not interested in small talk right now. I'm tapped out. And yet, you might say that to people, and then they'll say, well, couldn't you just make it work? I'm sure it's just a little bit, it won't be that big of a deal. I think it's great when you're around people and you can say, look, this is a pretty busy week, and I really don't want to add anything else to it. Or this has happened. I just think for a lot of people out there, that's maybe not always the environment they're in. And then, that's a lot of coaching that we do as well, is, okay, that is the truth. That's their truth. And for me, that idealistic space is a lovely place to be. And I have relationships. You and I have a relationship like that. So we appreciate that. But we both know from our coaching experience that that's not the place for everybody.
You're right. It's not. And there are lots of experiences that people have. I think what I'm hoping to draw out from this conversation is the importance of acknowledging this. The ability to offer compassion. It's interesting. Kirsten Neff, when she talks about this, says she doesn't have a definition of self-compassion versus compassion for other people. It's just compassion.
Mm-hmm.
And what I think we're, bringing this into the conversation is that if people, what are the just going back to what are the benefits? If people are genuinely unhappy because you're forcing them to do things or you're not appreciating them, you're not going to be getting the best out of it. You're not going to be getting the best performance out of people. If you're insisting that people come into work and into the office when actually they can be more productive at home on a particular day, it's not an expression of compassion. And it doesn't drive, as far as I know, there's not a huge amount of evidence that shows that forcing people to do things produces a better outcome than enabling people to, be in a much more regulated, much happier state of being. And the responsibility for that rests not only on the individuals to develop the skill sets around self-compassion, but on leaders and all of us in that respect to learn what that means so that we can genuinely do that for ourselves and other people. Because when it happens, people feel a lot happier. People feel in a better place, even if for a certain period of time, all we can do is get to 60%. Because, the other, in terms of the expectation of work, because 40% is taken quite legitimately on something else. Where is that discussion taking place about compassion at the individual level, in an organization, at a societal level? And we've all got a part to play in that. I think that's really what I'm hoping for from this conversation. And I don't mind it being a little bit idealistic, because I think even one step up is towards this is better.
Yeah, and the idealistic is definitely something we can attain, right? So it's that same concept of self-compassion, right? And it is that idea of, and that skill of well-being. It's important for us to have an ideal situation. I think when we start talking about this, just to not acknowledge that for everybody, they maybe have tried putting that out there and it has not worked for them in a healthy way. And so that ability to understand self-compassion is that maybe I can't share this with everybody today. Maybe I need to know who is on my team, who is on my team and how can I go about that? Because the idea here, she also talks about the idea of that not feeling isolated. And so if I am to say nobody's on my team, right, then that creates isolation. Whereas if I can, self-compassion is who's on my team.
Yeah.
How do I have that human connection? How do I connect with people? Have I thought about human connection in the different ways that it can actually exist? Can I connect human connections, compassion for self, and also well-being? Like, what are the dots for me that bring those things together? Because for all of us, they'll be slightly different.
Yeah.
No, I think Lee's.
Yeah, I am. And what I'm thinking is there a way to shift the balance enough so that we prioritize self-compassion and well-being significantly more than we do? Because if you put that at the forefront of your thinking, it's going to be then about getting the most out of people, getting the best out of people, they get the best out of themselves, and it's got to be good for business.
I think it's actually being interested in each other. I think it's actually being happy for somebody when they're doing something that makes them feel good.
Yeah.
I think it is being happy for it's being happy for somebody when they've worked partly towards something they want to achieve. Maybe they didn't get the whole thing, right? They didn't get the whole thing. But to me, this ability of, if I can be happy for someone else for what they've done, right? And that ability to really understand how judgy we can be and how jealous we can be.
Yeah.
And acknowledging self-compassion is actually, I'm jealous of that person. Because self-compassion is like, maybe I'm jealous about something. And it's not about being good or bad, but self-compassion is, okay, it's okay. I'm not going to be angry with myself that I'm jealous about something. It's like, the coaching question or the other question is more about like, okay, what's the reason for that? And what's stopping me from thinking that I can't have that? Or is that something I really want? We talk about the stones in your backpack, right? Like, is that something I want, or is it something else that I've been taught that I should want? So for me, it's a dynamic question around, and the benefits of self-compassion are really that you can start to explore things that maybe you don't like about yourself, things that you do judge. When you have self-compassion, you're like, oh, actually I'm jealous, or I do judge that, or I don't like that. And then self-compassion actually lets you start to explore them without being angry with yourself, You might have other words for that.
Yeah, well, you're reminding me that maybe what it is accepting ourselves as we are without judgment, because we are, we are the latest versions of ourselves at each moment. The part of the question about this today is, how often do we take the opportunity to ask the question of ourselves, how am I today, and really lean into that.
We don't.
That's really what this is about. And when we do, maybe recognizing that something's happened and we are genuinely upset about something, not beating ourselves up or feeling weak because we're upset about something, but actually just acknowledging how we feel, and being able to kind of lean in and give ourselves that proverbial hug, to show ourselves some genuine love. That's not to ruminate in the moment. That's not about ruminating. It's a kind of acceptance and a mindful acceptance that we're part of the human race, and it doesn't matter whether you're the most senior person in a gigantic global corporation, or somebody who's just started out on the rungs of a job, or just sitting there, final examinations. We have a shared common humanity, and part of what we're discussing is how do we recognize that, because it, I believe, drives a set of conversations around connection rather than difference. And for me, that's really, really important. We all want to be loved, really. We all want to be heard and accepted for who we are, and we all want to belong somewhere. Those things are very common, irrespective of who we are, where we are, what we do. I think we're at 32 minutes, Donna. So interesting conversation today.
I feel like my gut is telling me I think we've been in a slightly different conversation than maybe you were thinking, but doesn't mean we can't pick it up another time. But if anyone is interested in exploring this or just continue this conversation, Lee and I, you can find us both on LinkedIn and also at changeinnovators.com. We do come with that idea of news talk in the morning. We have a topic, but we don't really talk much before we get on. So we try and just
our stream of consciousness.
Stream of consciousness. So have a great day.
And you take care, everybody. Take care, Donna.
Ciao.